talk oil for a second and the influence it has on the economy. And just surged to $54 a barrel, and that's the highest it's been in about 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see OPEC continuing to make production cuts? That was what influenced the rise there in the rates. Do you see that continuing in 2017, and the barrel price continuing to climb up, or holding at that level? What do you
Well, I know what I read, and folks that know a lot more about this than I do are skeptical that OPEC can keep together. And they've had a history of these price supports falling apart. Somebody starts saying, I need more revenue, and starts cheating a little bit on their allocation on production. But so far it's held, and what we learned is oil can get too cheap, and usually cheaper oil is good for the economy. But what we kind of learned in this last one, when it got down below 30, I mean, that's too cheap, and we laid off, about 1 million people in the oil patch. And it seems like what I read, $50 to $60 is that sweet spot. More than that hurts consumers, less than that hurts the industry and and employment. So if we can keep it somewhere in between there, that makes this higher cost fracking still pay. Okay. So somewhere in this $50 to $60 range, if we could sustain that, I think it's the best for our economy.
Last thought, do you have a final projection for the economy in 2017?
I think we'll continue to grow. I think rates will go up. Again, this has been a disliked recovery, even though there's a lot to like about it. Again, we've crept back over, and again, the worst housing crisis since the Great Depression. We're back over that. So we've recovered in housing. Vehicle sales have been great over the past couple of years. The thing I worry the most about, Eric, is this two economies we've created. So the wealthy are getting wealthier because they own assets that appreciate: housing, stocks, financial markets. The lower income don't own those, so they're not enjoying the recovery like the rest of folks have. And the book that came out a couple years ago, Capital in the 21st Century by Thomas Piketty, points out that that's sort of what happens over time, that in a growing economy there's disparity in wealth, and we're seeing that. And that's what I think we need to work on the most. How can we take how can we take the increased wealth we're seeing, again, an all-time high in our country, but you ask those making 50% or less, or paying 50% in the taxpayers in that range, they would tell you they don't feel it at all. So although we did have about 3.5 million people come out of poverty last year, which was the most we've ever had, and that is encouraging. But still, there's too much disparity. That's what I worry the most about.
Yeah. See, so something to keep an eye on this next year, trying to close that gap.
Right. And I think there's some ways that can be done. The Earned Income Tax Credit is a great tool to help level that, and so there are some tools out there that can help foster more equality. I think, bottom line though, the best thing we can do is a better trained workforce, and you will have our employers who will tell you that I can't hire qualified people. I've got job openings and I cannot find people that are qualified to work for it, and we've got to develop a better workforce that comes through education and training, and we've got to do a better job of that. We've got to invest back into our workforce.
I wonder about the effort in closing that gap, the role of the president, because many people would say it's the key person in that, but there are certainly other factors. How do you assess that, and do you think that the president is the one that really ultimately dictates how the economy is split as it is right now, or what are the other key factors?
I think it's complex, and so the
Yeah.
president does have the gift of job owning and moral suasion to get people to do things. We just saw that with what he was able to do in Indiana and keep some jobs there. But ultimately, I think we have to invest in education, and that is early childhood education. I think is the best investment you can make, and getting more folks with quality credentials and higher education degrees. There is a goal in our state to have 60% of our population with a quality credential or a post K-12 degree. And we've got to invest in our public institutions to be able to do that, and we've got to invest in our infrastructure to do that, and that's hard to do when revenues are dwindling. So I do think there's a role publicly, and that's investment for public dollars, but also families also have to understand the importance of doing that and bettering themselves. And again, we can't lose sight of America's dream of upward mobility. Mm-hmm. That's what we've had is I want to do better than my parents. I want my children to do better than me.
Yeah.
And we've sort of lost sight of that in the last, decade or so.
So, lastly then, do you think 2017 is the year that the upward mobility swings back into a reality? Because it's not there right now.
It isn't, right? Yeah. I don't know what to expect in 2017. To be honest. We've not seen really what both the president or the new governor's philosophy is in higher education and workforce investment. So I don't know. I hope they see that importance, and again, I think the best dollar you can spend is early childhood education. If you're ready for kindergarten, you'll be reading at grade level by third grade, and if you're reading by grade level by third grade, you're probably going to graduate from high school. And if you graduate from high school, you're probably going to be successful going on to learn a quality credential, a skill, or higher ed. So we have to make those investments early. The tough thing about that in a public policy realm is you invest when they're 4, you don't get a payoff for 15 years.
Yeah, it's a long play.
It's a long play, and that's why we haven't done that, is because there are more pressing needs immediately. But again, best dollar you can spend, I think, is for early childhood education, and I hope someday, some way, we can figure that out.
Yeah. Well, thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks, Eric, so much. It's been a privilege and an honor.